Okay, we're going to get started. Good morning and welcome to the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for August 28th, 2019. The purpose of committee meetings are for the city departments to pass along information to the city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of the city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates the city administrator as the chair of the committee meetings, and by ordinance, the committee makes no formal decision on committee matters. Rather, items are voted to move to a mayor and council meeting for consideration and vote, or staff receives guidance from the committee regarding a matter. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during the committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7 p.m. in the city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month. The first item on today's agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for July 24th, 2019. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Judy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. Any questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Moving on to community development. Number 2, consideration of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code regarding code changes due to the Historic District Master Plan. And this is the one I think we are deferring to a work session.
That's correct. We, after putting this together, due to the lengthiness of this and the work discussions that could happen, I was looking at it probably being at least 2 hours based on everything that I've got on these slides. So we were looking at scheduling a work session with the mayor and council to go over everything on these, on everything that we have here.
Not if you're doing this as a staff.
Okay. Okay, so I don't think we need any action on this. Is there any questions or issues with it?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to number 3, consideration of a text amendment to Unified Development Code, section 9.5.11. Ms. Stivel.
All right, give me a minute. Had a lot of slides on the first one. Okay, this is a proposed text amendment change to Article 9.511, letter C, to add a new letter G with the following language. So what we have here is under vehicle sales or leasing new, to add another section to this. So what it would be is when the facility is used as a showroom only, the minimum lot size is not required. So the lot size in A, the minimum lot size is 1.5 acres. So when we just have a showroom, which is what we've had requests for, to put the vehicles inside, they'd only be inside, they would not be storing anything outside. We would add this to letter A, so that the facility is considered showroom only in the instances where the entirety inventory is kept within the building. So and there's no outdoor storage or display of the inventory. So we're looking to add a letter G to that section here in the code under 9.511. So this is a request for an agenda vote to be placed on the council agenda for initiation.
Floor is open.
Motion to move it forward.
Motion by Councilmember Kaiser.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Moving on to item number 4, consideration of the text amendment to Unified Development Code, section 12.7, flood damage prevention. Ms. Crawford.
Good morning. In middle of April of this year, I had the pleasure, quote unquote, of spending a week with a representative from FEMA, as well as somebody from the Environmental Protection Division who is with the State Floodplain Manager's Office. As a result of that, this was essentially a meeting to do an evaluation of the city's implementation of our floodplain ordinance. They looked at all of our ordinances, the history of all of our ordinances, looked at our record keeping. We drove around the city. They evaluated a lot of aspects of the program. In May, we received the letter in early June. It was dated May 21st, which requested some changes to the ordinance, which is what we're bringing to you today. There was also some additional process documentation they asked from us. We've already provided that. In addition to, we went through records for probably hundreds of parcels while we were having the meeting. As a follow-up, they did ask for additional records for 85 parcels, and we have transmitted that information to them. Essentially, what they have asked us to do is in the last section of the floodplain ordinance, there are some definitions that are provided, and they reference dates that the floodplain ordinance would be effective. And so one of the things that they've asked us to do is to add this language to the end of the definition of area of special flood hazard. It is above and beyond the standard state ordinance that we follow. It does not impact anything. It's a definition that is known. It's actually included throughout the document. It's just that they wanted this definition to be expanded to include the same language that's found elsewhere in the document. And essentially, it's just a further definition that streams with a drainage area of 100 acres or greater have a special flood hazard designation. So it's does not change anything in the intent or the effectiveness of our ordinance. It's just additional language at the end of the definition that they have asked us to put on there. In your packet, there should be a track changes version of the entire ordinance. These will be in the last few pages of the ordinance so that you can see the full definition, but it's very long and it wouldn't fit on one slide. The second thing that they wanted us to do is there's a reference to a date that we actually, I believe, Danelle can correct me if I have this wrong, was when we joined the CRS program, which meant that we've had a floodplain ordinance, but we were now part of the CRS program from an insurance perspective, if I have my wording correctly. So they've asked us to change the date to actually be when it is reflective of the actual ordinance date of December 15th, 1977, as opposed to the 98 date that I think that was there. Again, it doesn't change anything for us. We still process things the exact same way because we would look at the maps that were in play at the time, because even if the city wasn't in the ordinance, Fulton County was. So that was asked to be changed in 2 locations. In the definition of existing construction, it's changing that date of effectiveness. For existing manufactured home, park, or subdivision, also changing that date to December 15th of 1977. And then they ask us to add a new definition. This is a state definition of the manufactured home park or manufactured home subdivision, only because we refer to it in our definitions. They wanted us to have an actual definition of it, even though we have none of these in Roswell. So this is just a definition in accordance with the state regulations of what a manufactured home park or manufactured home subdivision is. And then 2 more date corrections for new construction as well as for new manufactured homes or park subdivisions. And that is it. This is for your approval to put on agenda for initiation.
Exciting stuff. Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Councilmember Judy, second by the mayor. Councilmember Palermo. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Moving on to transportation, item number 5, consideration of change order to ACOM for design and permitting or mitigation elements for the National Park Service in the amount of $176,640. Mr. Ralph.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everyone. So sorry to start with the change order, but I promise we have a couple of good ones coming later on the agenda. So the first one is a change order for AECOM. So just to give you some background on the item, this is our the historic gateway project that we have been working on for many years. We needed some land from the national park, so we committed to do some mitigation on the park's property for taking their land. So we have executed committed letters, multiple letters with the national parks over the years. This same very item went to committee this year in February and March, and we just didn't have, the amount of the change order was much higher before, and we just didn't have the agreement with the national parks at the time. So we've had a lot of conversations with the National Park Services since then. We appreciate the mayor coordinating some of those conversations. So now we have a resolution with an agreement basically with the national parks on what they want the bridge to look like. So the amount of the change order, and I'm gonna get into more details on that later. So the amount is $176,640. It was before $376,000. So now it has reduced because of the agreement we have and the new specs the National Parks is willing to accept. And there is a total of funding available in the historic Gateway T-Splost budget at 300 million. So this is the picture of the bridge. So what they want is going to look something similar to this one. We have an agreement on the maximum width with them and the type of structure which this is. So the actual bridge that we're going to build them may look a little bit different, but we agreed on some of the specs and the maximum cost of the bridge. So this is just a comparison of, I'm sorry, some of the numbers are not showing up here, but back in 2012, the bottom box, the light blue, was 500,000. That was for the design and permitting. And the top dark blue box was construction of those, all the mitigation projects, including the pedestrian bridge. Most of the 500,000 was going to be for the pedestrian bridge. So now, as of today, so we need an additional 176,000 for the design, extra design work that we have to do, that our consultant actually had to do to compare several different options of the bridges for the national parks while we were negotiating, and some extra permitting processes that we'll have to go through. For the construction part, we are still hoping that it's going to be within the 500,000 number, and that was our goal, that we wanted to keep the construction of all the mitigations we are having to do for the national parks within that number, so we are actually able to. And again, that 176, that change order, yes, it's some design and some permitting, but it's just that over the past 12 months, while we were talking back and forth with the national parks, we asked our consultant to do a lot of extra work that was not originally anticipated. And I just want to highlight what we have at the bottom of the slide. So the city's total cost for the historic Gateway project, including the design and the final design that we are yet to come to you for approval, is going to be at the end about 6 to 7 million. Currently, we are at about 4.5 million number. And then GDOT has already started the right-of-way acquisition phase. Total cost of that is going to be about 10 to 12 million. And the construction is estimated at 32 million. So staff's recommendation is to move to a future mayor and council meeting for approval of this change order with AECom.
Thanks, Mohammed. Floor is open. Questions or comments? Is there a motion? Motion to move forward by the mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Moving to item number 6, discussion of updates to the City of Roswell Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Mr. Cox.
Just to give you a quick recap on our bike ped plan, thank you. Back in 2018, the City Council approved funding to commission a new bike ped plan for the city, as we've never had one before. So we kicked it off earlier this year in April, and we had a big, robust public involvement campaign, and we're well underway in crafting recommendations and doing analysis. And we'll be bringing this to you later in the year, but we want to update you on our progress to date. And I want to introduce Eric Lusher with Pond and Company, who will give you the update, and we welcome all your feedback and guidance.
So good morning. Again, my name is Eric Lusher. I'm the project manager with Pond, and have a very dense presentation for you today. A lot of information. We're going to try to go through it as quickly as possible, and then hopefully get a little bit of feedback from you as well this morning. So real quick, we're just going to try to talk a little bit about what we're doing, what our process is, talk a little bit about our community engagement, talk about our infrastructure, so that's sort of the discussion of where we're moving in terms of recommendations, talk a little bit about policy, and then also brief you on next steps. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do with this plan, but these 4 bullets here, I hope and think encapsulate in many ways what we're trying to do. Certainly, we're trying to look and evaluate the city's policies and practices. We are looking at potential refinements to the city sidewalk matrix, which is what you use to prioritize your sidewalk program. We're certainly looking at identifying and prioritizing just kind of broader bicycle and pedestrian investments. And then finally, we want to make sure that the plan is fiscally realistic. So it's not just a pie in the sky wish list of all the things you can do, but there's some element that kind of interfaces that with reality in terms of, what likely funding is going to be and things of that nature. So our process is a little more complicated than this graphic implies, but I like to always try to simplify complicated things. So this is my attempt to do that. And when you look at it from a simple perspective, there's really three phases that we're doing in this project. There's an initial data gathering phase that was back in the spring. That was really just establishing our baseline, getting a lot of data, looking at community conditions, doing some initial community engagement. Over the course of the summer, and this is the phase we're kind of wrapping up right now, we've been in our assessment phase. This is where we're identifying our needs, understanding where the challenges are, things of that nature. As we're moving into the fall, we're going to start crafting our recommendations. So we're right on the precipice of being able to do that, which is why it was a good time to come here this morning and brief the committee. In the recommendations phase, we're going to be looking at again, the policies and the infrastructure investments that we think make a lot of sense for the city of Roswell. And our goal and our hope is to get this whole thing wrapped up here in calendar year 2019. So community input. As Dave mentioned, we've done a lot of community input. Hopefully we've gotten a good cross-section, I think we have, of the community. And the way we did that is by not doing just one thing, but doing lots of different things. So we have a stakeholder advisory committee. We're meeting with them 3 times during this process. In fact, our second meeting with them is tonight in this very room. We're doing a series of community meetings. We've had 2 already, and we've got 2 coming up in a few weeks in the middle of September. We've had an online survey, which has been a great success. We've got a lot of really good input as part of that process. And then we've also done what I call tactical engagement. So this is instead of people self-selecting, saying, hey, I'm going to take that survey or I'm going to go to that meeting. We're going to them. We're going to the places where people are and trying to capture them in just their environment here in Roswell and ask them some questions. So we've done that through what I call pop-up events and also intercept surveys. And I'll describe that a little bit more in a moment or two. So again, our stakeholder advisory committee, we have 3 meetings planned as part of this process. The first one was back in June. Again, we have one tonight, and then we're looking at one in mid-October. And we've received a lot of input from the stakeholders, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how that interfaces with the broader community input we've had. But this image right here is one of 2 images that we developed with the stakeholders that encapsulate kind of the vision for the future of bicycle and pedestrian connectivity here in Roswell. And it might be a little bit hard to read. Some of the highlights don't really kind of look so great on that screen. But basically, well, a couple things that were emphasized was connectivity, obviously. But there was sort of a shift to thinking about north-south and east-west travel here in Roswell, and that all sort of connected by what I'm kind of nebulously referring to as the central Roswell area. You could extrapolate that and say that's Canton Street downtown, this part of Roswell, or it could be kind of a larger area also, depending on what your interpretation or definition of it is. But definitely there was an emphasis on that north-south and east-west travel and the understanding that there's sort of a central area of activity here in Roswell. Our community open houses, like I said, we have 4 meetings planned total. Our first meetings were back in May. Lots of great input here. I think we had about 60 to 70 people show up to those meetings, so that's a pretty good crowd for this type of process. And I'm going to come back to some feedback we got as part of those meetings. Our online engagement, so we're very proud of this. We had an online survey and also an interactive map, which you can see a screenshot of it there to the right, open for comment from mid-April through the end of June. As part of the traditional survey piece, we got about 550 responses, so 550 people took the survey, lots of great input there. But even more helpful, quite frankly, were the 930 comments and pins that we received. So when I'm referring to that, all those dots that you see there, that's people on an interactive map putting down a pin and saying, we gave them sort of questions that they could kind of fit within, but saying, I think there's a safety issue here at this location, or this is a place I'd like to walk to or bike to. So we got lots of information as part of that process, as you can see from this image here. And what's great about it is that it allows us, that information, the way we're able to use it, we're able to pull it into our GIS systems and analyze it. So here's just a quick map of safety concerns that we received relative to pedestrian travel. And you can see all these pins come with comments. So there's some sample comments that we're able to really understand what people are thinking. Some people even uploaded pictures, photographic evidence, which is really helpful. Another one, locations that people want to walk to or bike to. And we have about 3 or 4 others in the spirit of moving quickly. I'm not going to go through all of them. But the point being is that we got a lot of great input as part of this process. And then finally, our tactical engagement. So again, this is when we go out to people instead of them coming to us. So we've had 2 pop-up events so far. We did the Alive in Roswell event back in, I want to say that was June or May. My mind's going a little bit at the moment. And we're going to be tentatively back out in September as well. We also did the Roswell Moves event. That was in late April. And then we've done our intercept interviews. So intercept interviews are when we're out just in kind of public locations, a lot of parks, as you can see. And we've got a clipboard and we've got a short version of our survey. And we just approach people who want to talk to us and ask them a little bit about bicycle and pedestrian issues here in Roswell. So this has really been a great way of capturing, again, those folks who aren't self-selecting to come to the meetings and getting kind of a broader pulse of what people are thinking here in the community. So you can see, we've been all over. It's a great opportunity to also, in addition to, kind of reaching out broadly, it's a great opportunity to talk to those people that we know probably can't make a traditional public meeting. So, family with children, you see we spent some time at the Roswell Area Park Playground. We've been at some of the MARTA stops on Holcomb Bridge Road and on 9. So these are just a really good way to get kind of a broader slice of life of what people are thinking. And we've got about, I want to say offhand, about 100 of these. So a really good way to get a lot of input. I'm going to switch gears very quickly here. So these are different types of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I'm going to reference this on the next slide. But we have sharrows on the top left. Those are basically striped indications that this would be a travel lane that you might see bicyclists on. I think we all broadly know what sidewalks are and bicycle lanes. Then we have multi-use paths. Those are, paths that are wide enough that people could walk or bike on them legally. And then we have cycle tracks, which are kind of like a bicycle lane, but, give you more opportunity for travel. You can see that cycle track there actually has 2-way travel. So it's sort of a bicycle lane, the next evolution of it. So with all that information, we have asked in our surveys, in our meetings, and on all of our engagement, just kind of what people think about those. What's sort of their response to seeing some of those different treatments here in Roswell. And on the left is the culmination of all the surveys and the community meetings that we've done. And you can see that the green means I love it. So in general, people like a lot of this stuff. That the yellow means some kind of into it, but I'm not sure. It depends on the environment. So we're getting a lot of broad support for most of these treatments. Those numbers that you see there are sort of a weighted score out of 4. So the closer you are to 4, the more broader preference there is. And you can see, a lot of interest in multi-use path. That's certainly the one that kind of rose to the top. But then we ask a more difficult question to our stakeholder group. And this was more of a trade-off question. Because all these different things have different levels of ease and in terms of implementation, and then also sort of the fiscal component of them. So, for instance, a cycle track tends to be a lot more expensive than, say, a bicycle lane. So we started asking them a little bit more about how they could think about the trade-offs. And when we did that, we got sort of a different response. We got, the interest in sidewalks became much more clear. Still a lot of interest in multi-use path, but it wasn't the number one if you want to kind of rank them from 1 to 5. So, I think we got a lot of broad direction from this, but certainly wanted to brief you on, how that came out, and then there was a little bit of a difference between the general public and then our stakeholder group, the direction they thought we needed to move into. Another question we asked, and there's a lot to go through, but I'll try to go through it really quickly, is we just set up a series of ideas of what the bicycle and pedestrian system could do here in Roswell. There's a lot of things it can do. It can connect just kind of generally within the community. It could focus on gaps we have in our sidewalk system. We could focus on connecting to surrounding communities. We could focus on connecting to schools and parks or activity centers. There's all these different types of things we could do. And we probably want to do some combination of all of them. Well, we want to sort of understand where the priorities were when we think about all those different goals. So we took all that, and you can see, again, a lot of broad support for most of these. A lot of these categories, it's kind of broadly hard to disagree with them. As you can see, most people did not. But this, again, gives us some sense of where the priorities are. And the ones that certainly rose to the top were filling gaps in the existing network and then enhancing connections here in the city. All right, so all that is background to starting to develop the plan and our infrastructure plan. So we did a fairly analytical component where we started to look at different considerations of what might affect or might influence bicycle and pedestrian travel here in Roswell. So this is a data-driven analysis. And one thing we like to look at is demand. So what is the sort of characteristics and conditions in the population here in Roswell? This is a lot of census data, and we have a variety of different criteria that we look at, which you can see there on the right panel. This example that I'm going to show you here is probably the most straightforward one. This is population density. So the idea is in the places where there's more population density, there's more likelihood that there will be more people walking and biking. It's a pretty simple correlation. So this map here that you see, this is a population density map of Roswell based on census data. And when we take it and we run it through our analysis, we're able to convert that into the actual network of Roswell. So now we're able to look at the different streets and corridors we have here in Roswell and rank them relative to the population that they serve. So we do this for all these categories and we get an overall demand score. We also look at attractions. So these are the places that people want to go to. Parks, certainly, schools, MARTA bus stops, retail and activity centers, civic sites, and also places where people work. This example is parks and recreation centers here in Roswell. So again, you can see the map showing parks, and then when we kind of convert that into an analysis, it looks like that. And one thing that this does is that it looks at where there's a lot of different parks or lots of different facilities in the same place. So it weights those places where you have a lot of interest higher than those places than where if you just happen to be around the corner from one park or something to that effect. We also like to look at character, so the actual character of the built environment. This has a huge influence on people's desire or even their ability to get around on a bike or walking around. So we look at things like topography or proximity to existing facilities, and also we're looking at safety, so where are there crashes that we've noticed. We're also looking at block size. This example is topography. So we all know Roswell has some topography challenges. There's parts that are very flat and parts that are very not flat. And those areas that are not very flat are extremely challenging. So on this map, the darker areas are sort of high points and the whiter areas are low points. We take this information and then we're able to convert it into an understanding of what parts of our network are more flat and what parts are less flat. And the idea, again, is that the areas of our network that are more flat are those areas that are going to have more likelihood and more interest for people to walk and bike. And then the final thing is the recognition that all that is great, but it's really focusing on the existing condition. And there's a lot of things happening here in Roswell. We're planning for a bright future. So we try to think a little bit about how we can anticipate the future here in Roswell. So a few things that we look at. One is the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan gives us guidance in terms of character areas, which relates broadly to land use and where there may be more activity and more intensity in certain parts of the city. So we're able to use that and also reference that in our analysis. We also look at areas where there's broad expectation of increases in population and also broad increases in employment. So we take all that and then we have this one map. There's all this criteria that goes into it, but we have this one map at the culmination of this process. And it gives us a broad understanding of where there's more likelihood of people walking and biking and less likelihood. And you can see, not surprisingly, when you kind of think about how these criteria and you think about how Roswell's set up, there's a lot of interest in that, again, nebulously central part of the community here. So we take that, and this is where we start to interface with the vision for the future of the community. And, there's a lot of hubs of activity here. The propensity tells us a little bit about that, and then there's some that we just kind of know because we're here in Roswell and we understand where people are going to. So we've developed 5 hubs. One is sort of that Crabapple area up 140, the area around the intersection of 92 and Woodstock Road, certainly Canton Street and downtown, the Holcomb Bridge Road 400 area, And then finally, East Roswell, where you have the Kroger and you've got the high school out there. These are places where there's activity, right? And we started building that, and we started thinking about kind of a hub and spoke system. And if you're looking at this map and you're saying, well, that looks a little bit like the Roswell loop system that we've already got planned. It is. We're using a lot of the existing segments of the Roswell loop. It's just sort of a recontextualization of how we're thinking about it. And some of this is, like I said, driven by the feedback we've had from our stakeholders and from the public. And then some of it's really kind of building off this propensity analysis. So it's all coming together right here. But I think, if you kind of look at it this way, again, it's very similar to that Roswell loop map, if you're familiar with that, and I'm going to bring that up in a second also. But it kind of starts to make it more of an east-west, north-south orientation when you think about those hubs and the places that we're trying to serve. So shifting gears for just 1 second, I'm going to come back to that. But through all that process, we start developing what we call target corridors. And these are the corridors that we want to focus on as part of this process. So we've got our existing Roswell loop. Then we've got our proposed new on-road corridors. You can see those fill a lot of the gaps in some of these areas. And then our proposed off-road corridors. And the idea is, as we're moving to this recommendations phase, we're going to look at all of these corridors. We're going to identify the opportunities. We're going to identify the challenges. And hopefully we're able to convert most of these into projects. Some might fall off because we might look at one of these corridors and say, it'd be great if we could do it, but the feasibility is just not there. We might shift to a parallel corridor if we see an opportunity. So this is a starting point for us to start developing our recommendations. And one other thing that these target corridors do is, well, they do a lot of things, but just to kind of emphasize, certainly provides connectivity to the river, enhances connectivity to Canton Street. We're seeing opportunities for trails in East Roswell. Tighter connectivity in that central part of Roswell, which I know I've emphasized a couple of times already. And then finally, things that they're already doing, but just want to emphasize it and reinforce it, connections to Alpharetta. So when you put all this information together, I know it's a lot, here we've got our hub and spoke system again with those target corridors. And you can see, again, how a lot of this is working. And you can also see how this relates to the existing Roswell loop. Most of the loop is covered by this system. We're not suggesting that the parts of the loop that aren't covered by the system, that we need to abandon those. That's not what we're suggesting. We're just suggesting that maybe we want to focus on these corridors that are on the red lines a little bit more than those other corridors. And then I'm going to skip over that because that's a lot of information. And so I'm going to go into policy. So policy, we're going to focus primarily, just because you can see there's a lot of material here, we're going to focus primarily on the sidewalk matrix. That's the thing we're focusing on primarily as part of this process. A few other things, but this is the real big push and real big focus of our analysis. So to do this, we have looked at some peer communities, and we selected those peer communities in a variety of ways. We look for communities that have similar population density, and also sort of represent where Roswell is or where Roswell wants to go in terms of its walk-friendly status and also its bike-friendly certification status. There's a lot of similarities in terms of how you prioritize your sidewalks in Roswell and these other communities, including, I think the most important thing is that it's data-driven and it's objective. There's no single right way to do it. Everyone does this a little bit differently, but the thing that I think is important is to have an objective process that's data-driven. You're doing that and all of your peers are doing that. Certainly you prioritize attractions here in Roswell, and most other communities do that as well. And then also, we have what we call first side, second side distinction here in Roswell. So that's the understanding that if we have a road and we've got a sidewalk already on one side of the road, that corridor, we're not going to prioritize that as high as a corridor that has sidewalks on both sides of the road, right? And that's on zero sides of the road, because we want to make sure that we're providing at least some coverage to those places that don't have any coverage. But there are some differences. One thing that most of these communities do, they tie in with their land use. And we talked a little bit about that in our propensity analysis, how that could potentially work. They also prioritize connectivity, and I'll explain that in a second. And they also look at population served. So with all that, these aren't necessarily recommendations, but these are certainly considerations for discussion and feedback. Some things that we think might be worth taking a look at and considering if you want to look at a refinement of this policy. Factor in population served. And again, there's lots of ways to do that. You could look at just population density, such as that map we showed you a couple of minutes ago. You could also look at the type of population served. Census data can tell us, and we've done that in our analysis, where there are households that have less access to vehicles than other households, so we can prioritize those areas. could also prioritize areas where there's maybe more younger people or more older people who might have more of a need for bicycle and pedestrian travel. So there's lots of different ways to do that. Certainly coordinating with your comprehensive plan and land use, I think that's really just kind of a great broad goal in general to try to connect your transportation and land use policies, and this is a great way to do it. Considering existing connectivity, so prioritizing places that are more adjacent or proximate to existing facilities that we have in our system. And then also looking at street connectivity. So if you have areas that have large block sizes or kind of cul-de-sac oriented, those are areas that probably don't have as much need for walking and biking as places that have a more dense grid pattern. And then finally, creating tiers for implementation. So right now we have a scoring that rewards more points effectively to parts of, rewards more points to sidewalk apps that are on the Roswell loop. What we're suggesting is we can break that up a little bit. We can prioritize based on areas that are more community serving, so kind of really cross the expanse of Roswell. And that would be if we were to move in that hub and spoke direction, I think those would be those corridors that were in red, potentially, that have that community serving. And then there's the corridors that are more neighborhood serving. They're very important too, but they don't touch as many people, they don't touch as many communities. So when we're thinking long-term, that's the system we want, but those are not necessarily the corridors we want to prioritize first. So we want to think a little bit about that. So I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully I went through it relatively quickly. But before I close and open up to any questions, just go over some next steps for you. I know I mentioned that we're looking to wrap this up in a calendar year, 2019. So we're right on track, but we still have a lot of work to do. We're now developing our project recommendations, and certainly with any feedback we hear from you today and also from our stakeholders tonight, we're going to be ready to hopefully start completing that process. So we're looking at our target corridors, and we're going to start drafting recommendations soon. We have public meetings scheduled for mid-September, September 16th and September 17th. One's here at City Hall, and the other one is at the East Roswell Library, if I'm calling correctly. And at that point, we're going to have our draft ideas for everyone based on all the feedback we're hearing today. And that's when we're going to start to bringing in that fiscal consideration also. So at that point, we have a wish list, but then we're going to start thinking about, well, how does this wish list compare to the reality of what we actually can do? And with all that, then we can start preparing the plan. So we're looking at submitting a draft plan for staff review in early October. That seems like that might be a ways from now, but it's actually not. It's, we're probably about 6 weeks away from being able to do that. Hopefully, looking for your consideration as council in November. And then that would put us on track for an adoption in early December. So that's our plan, and we're moving pretty well with it. And I know that was a lot of information, but certainly want to get any feedback from this committee, particularly on the target corridors, the hub and spoke system, and then also the sidewalk matrix ideas that we've come up with. So thank you.
Thank you. Floor is open for questions.
Yes, sir.
So I certainly like the fact that you've done this database. When it comes to these sorts of things, it's very hard to determine whose priority is the most important priority. So I like all the overlays, the way you've done that. We have a situation today where we have, greater than $40 million worth of sidewalks on our list, just sidewalks alone, not including, multi-use paths, bike trails, that sort of thing. We do $500,000 to $1 million worth a year. You do the math, that's somewhere between 40 and 80 years to complete. And so taking a look at this without predetermined, ideas as to where things should go, I think helps with that quite a bit. And I think it will help us in the future as we look at using funds the most wise way we can to provide citizens with the kind of bike ped master that we're looking to do. So thank you for doing that the way you've done it. I very much appreciate the methodology.
Certainly, that was our goal. Yes, sir.
One quick question. Who are the stakeholders?
So we have 10 citizen stakeholders that we put out by social media earlier this year. I think we received almost 50 applications.
Okay.
And we picked 10.
Okay.
We picked them geographically, so every part of the city was covered, east side, up north, Kansas City Historic District. So we have 10 stakeholders who are active in the process.
Perfect. I also agree. I think, earlier this year, or maybe it was late last year, we went through the sidewalk matrix process and what went into that, and redefining that, I think, and looking at best practices and what's best for the city based upon the data-driven will help us move forward on that, because I think there's probably some refining to do on that. So I'm excited about that, and I think that the maps you showed were awesome and eye-opening of what you found out so far in the hubs. I love the hub and spoke plan. So good stuff. Thank you. Thank you.
How do you delineate between recreation and need? So we've got folks that
Sure.
walk or need to ride a bicycle, that's their mode of transportation. How do you delineate that between recreation?
Sure. So that's you're getting to what I think is the fundamental question with any bicycle and pedestrian plan, which is, who are we planning for? Are we planning for that recreational user? Are we planning for the person who is on a bike or is walking because that's their only choice? The short answer is we're doing all of that. But I think with a lot of our, I'm gonna just kind of flip back to some of this. I think with a lot of kind of how we built this, it's a good balance. Because, for instance, this is a great way that we can start thinking about the recreational user potentially versus the user that has that actual need. Population density tells us where people are, so that's fantastic. But a lot of these other categories, looking at concentrations of households with no automobile, looking at concentrations of people who are under the age of 18 or over the age of 55, and then that last bullet, looking at where there's already evidence of people who are commuting using something other than their vehicle, right? That's a great way that we can start tapping into that need or where that shift is already happening. Again, these are just some criteria out of a lot. But this helps start to make sure that we're thinking a little bit about, or hopefully a lot, about the people who have the actual transportation need as opposed to just the recreational one. And if you look at kind of the overall propensity, I think, sorry, there's a lot to go through here. I think the propensity really kind of starts to capture, if you think about the demographics and some of the needs in Roswell. What I always like about these maps when we do this process is that in some ways it tells you what you already know. So that's comforting on one hand, but on the other hand, it's a data-driven way of doing it. So it kind of puts the data into what would otherwise be an emotional response of where we think our needs are. And you can see, that area kind of right over there about Holcomb Bridge Road. We know there's a lot of need there, and I think an analysis like this helps us capture that. The other side is when we think about what the actual recommendation is. What is the infrastructure improvement? So I'm going to go back here. All these things do different. All these facility types do different things and meet different needs. I mean, all of them move people from point A to point B, but some of them are a little more geared towards the recreational user versus the transportation need. I would argue a Shero is probably something that's more geared towards the recreational user. A lot of the recreational users, ironically, don't like Sheros, but that tends to be something that is geared more towards someone who's going to be potentially riding their bike around town because they're going for a ride. Obviously, a sidewalk, it does a lot of things. I think a sidewalk, in particular, in places where there's a lot of need for just people to get around, I think that's kind of the easy way to look at it. A multi-use path tends to be a little more recreational, with the exception of in those places where you have so much, you have that culmination of both need and recreational use. A multi-use path, if we can get in there, is really a great way because it's so wide. If you have a system that is heavily used, that gives the ability for people to move around freely, whatever their purpose of travel is. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. And I'll just finish with, one other thing. This image right here. One of the reasons we do this is because we want to make sure that we're talking to the underserved community. And when we talk about need, very often we are talking about the underserved community. So, that image in the top right, we're there at, I think that's on 9, but we're at one of the MARTA stations there. We spent a day doing these interviews, just kind of walking around on Holcomb Bridge Road and State Road 9 and just talking to people who were in the active process of walking around to get wherever they needed to go. So we put a lot of stock in making sure that we're listening to those folks and that we're pulling that into our analysis as well. Obviously, we're trying to do a lot of things with what we're looking at. So we are focused as well on the recreational user, but we know an important part of this is making sure that we're meeting the needs of those who have very real needs and have to use a system like this to get around.
Well, thank you, I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Looking for action?
It's always looking for guidance before we go to the public.
Yeah.
Okay. Great job.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
gents.
Yep.
Nice
Yeah,
work.
got a lot of slides to go through here to get you back on track.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes. Yeah, what was it fast? I hope it was. I know when I did dry run, it was relatively fast, but you never know when you actually do it if it's fast. Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Eric and Dave, for all the work and a great presentation. I appreciate that. And I just want to close that one by saying that please, if you hear anything, let the public know that there is still opportunity at the public meetings coming up in September, and, just an email will do it. We just want to hear from more and more
Okay, moving on to item number 7, consideration to award a design contract with KCI Technologies in the amount not to exceed $61,755 for proposed intersection improvements on Woodstock Road at West Crossville Road, State Route 92. Mr. Ralph.
Thank you, Gary. So this is just to give you some background. If you can picture the intersection of Highway 92 and King Road, Woodstock area. So some background. We have a intersection that works okay. We know that Highway 92 is a very congested corridor, but on the Woodstock Road side. So that's the northbound approach. We lack a right turn lane, and that causes excessive backups for the northbound approach to the intersection. And of course, then the Roswell High School is further up the street. So that traffic, of course, that contributes to this backup as well. And then we learned last year that the Crabapple Middle School is going to move from Crabapple Road to Woodstock Road. So that makes it more important for us to take care of that deficiency we have in the system. The school is going to open in 2021 at the new location. So we had requested money for design only for this intersection improvement in the current year's budget, and you approved that. Thank you so much for doing that. So we have, so again, this is just a graphic. On the top right of the graphic is the Roswell High School, actually further up the graphic, but north is to the top of the page. So this arrow shows where we want to do the right turn lane. So that's the money was approved, $200,000 for the design of this intersection improvement, and construction funding to come later. That was a plan, but we are here for an approval to assign that design work to one of our consultants, but we have a recommendation, a suggestion for you to take care of another problem in the area if you want to take care of that problem, very well-known problem, as part of the same effort or not. This is just a suggestion, by the way. So further up on King Road, Roswell High School traffic issues, we have talked about them over the years many times. There is too many problems caused by the school traffic, and we have a lot of options that we have talked about over the years. Some are easy, some are just hard to do, some impact the community, like some of those back connections, but nothing much has really been implemented. School has done certain small things on their property, and we have done like a crosswalk, and we recently did some delineators here at the intersection of 92, just to keep the vehicles in their lane. So, but anyways, nothing significant has been done. So we have one suggestion. One of the ideas that we have talked about before is kind of extending, if you're familiar with the area. So here, the King Road is one lane going northbound, but at closer to 92, there is this receiving lane that goes a few hundred feet to kind of give you access into this shopping center. That's where the Walgreens is and Pike Nursery is further down. So just to get you access to that. And then it kind of just merges back into this just one northbound through lane. So the two-lane operation does not go to the parent drop-off, which is further up on the graphic. But then this is the entrance to the, here at the top is the entrance to the student parking lot. So that gets pretty full. A lot of cars go in there every day. So our one of the suggestion before that we want to talk about today is kind of extending this lane that's about a few hundred feet now. So if we extend it for another 600 feet, we could actually take that into the student parking lot. So anybody that's going into the student parking lot, they can just be in this lane and then stay in the lane and then kind of just get into the student parking lot. So that would be a huge help for some of these reasons. So this is again looking to the north. Roswell High School is towards the top right. So see how the school bus is just trying, this is like the merge point. So the school bus is trying to merge, and then of course, some cars are letting them in, which is good. But then they are almost backing up into Highway 92 where the through operation has, already started. So that kind of puts some people backing up into Highway 92. And then this is again looking north, queues pretty bad over there. So anything we could do, so adding more capacity here, extending this lane all the way into the student parking lot would be a huge help. So this is now looking south actually. So you see further where the green circle is, this is the entrance to the student parking lot, by the way, on the bottom left. But see what's happening here with the school buses merging and then, just cars backing up into 92. And then again, so this is the entrance to the two shopping centers. And again here, it just looks crazy here. Too much going on with not enough capacity there. And of course, we've got all our new drivers going to the high school. So that's not a safe situation for those new drivers as well. So KCI is one of our on-call consultants, so we could assign them to the work order to do the design for the northbound right turn lane, which was the approved project for design. And this is all they're basically the work that they're going to do. So if we just do the northbound right turn lane on Woodstock to turn eastbound onto 92, the design cost would be $61,755. That came actually surprisingly low, which is good. But then if you want to add kind of the phase two, if you want to call that, it could be another $62,000 for the design of that, extending that lane into the student parking lot. But we do two separate set of plans. So when the time comes to ask for construction money, we would ask for both, but you could choose to fund just one, whichever one you want to do. So that'll kind of at least take us to the next step to solve some of the Roswell High School traffic problem. So what the staff recommendation is to move to a future mayor and council meeting to award the design contract. So we would want to, of course, design both projects that I just mentioned, but if you want to keep it just to the Woodstock right turn lane, that's totally okay. So we have $200,000 for the design in the current year, and for the next fiscal year, we'd be requesting for construction funding for one or both, depending upon how you approve it today.
Thank you. Floor is open.
So I think we absolutely do need to address in front of the high school there and on King Road. So yeah, I actually drive that most mornings, and I think it's actually even worse than some of your pictures show, with just how the buses will be out onto 92, et cetera. The one thing that I'd ask, so I absolutely want to support this. I'd like you to look at, my only concern that I'd like to be addressed with it is your predecessor would often talk about when you add lanes, you're decreasing pedestrian safety potentially, because you do get a lot of kids walking over there. You get kids crossing, et cetera. Even though there's not a crosswalk, you're still going to get kids crossing over from the Publix, et cetera. So I think we absolutely need to address this automobile issue. And while doing that, I'd like to hear from staff if there's any suggestions on how you can ensure we're not decreasing the children's safety that are walking. I don't know if that means a median in a certain area or anything like that. I'm not gonna come up with a solution. I'm gonna ask you to kind of bring your recommendation, but I just want you to think, absolutely, let's improve the automobile aspect, but also let's look at how we make sure our kids are safe while crossing the road, et cetera.
Actually, that's a pretty good idea. Of course, that's always on our mind, but I can tell you that in front of the school, there's a pedestrian crossing with a RFB, and we have one at the intersection. So what you may have heard us talk in the past is, so if we were adding a new lane here at the intersection, of course, it would extend the length of the pedestrian crossing, means pedestrian would have to stay in the pavement, in the conflict zone, basically, for longer. So that's already there, that the lane is already here at the intersection. We're only talking about extending. But what just got me thinking with your suggestion is there's a gore
Right.
that could easily be converted into a refuge island. So we look at that as part of the.
I'd like that to occur because again, even though I understand where there's the crosswalks, I certainly witness every single day kids crossing, and I'd much prefer a
Yeah.
refuge safety spot.
Yeah, they kind of park, I guess, everywhere in the area. So yeah,
Right.
that's a good point. We look at the median option if we choose to move forward with this.
It's been 24 years since I left, so I don't remember where do the buses turn in? Do they turn in the front circle, or do they go around the back on,
So yeah, they go around, they make a right turn on Hardscrabble, kind of where we just had the
Right, the
ribbon
ribbon
cutting
cutting.
for the project. That's where the buses go. So they go all the way up King and make a right on Hardscrabble.
okay, yeah, because I was saying if they had turned around in the front circle, then it might make sense to go the extra 100 yards to the front circle with the turn lane. So the
Yeah.
buses could get there, but if they go all the way around, then,
I mean, we'd love to do more. It's just it's going to cost more money, and of course. But I think that student parking lot is big and it gets full. There's a lot of cars.
Oh, yeah.
So if those cars are not trying to merge in the northbound through lane, I think that would be a good help. So you kind of get more benefit for the money we.
sure.
Can you give us an idea what the construction cost on both of these projects will be?
So
Just ballpark.
yeah, I'm gonna
Are we
Rob.
talking
You wanna?
5 million, 10 million?
Oh no, not those. Yeah, I know we have talked about millions a lot lately, but now we are back to the norm.
Okay, good.
This is not millions.
Mohammed, currently, does the sidewalk extend all the way up, all the way in front of the high school? I can see it up to the, I assume that's the turn into the shopping center, but does it go all the way up? It does.
Yeah, yes, it looks like it, and yeah, Dave is saying yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes.
Will that be enhanced or moved with the addition of the turn lane? The sidewalks?
It may, and so we're not gonna remove any of the sidewalk. We may have to rebuild some
May
of
have
it.
to rebuild. Okay,
but
that was my question,
we
just to make
keep
sure I
the
didn't just-
facility, if it's there, we'll keep, and if there's like a little gap or something that I'm not aware of course we will
To
take
be able
care
to
of
fill
as
it
well.
in all the way up the entire length of the school. Okay, great.
Regarding the mayor's question for cost estimates, construction for both of these phases is relatively inexpensive. The big unknown is utility costs. Construction, we're just looking at additional asphalt, additional curb and gutter. Right-of-way should be fairly inexpensive. It's the utility impacts you can see on the screen right there, right, that will be the unknown. I would say both projects individually, right-of-way, utility, and construction all added up, individually, they're both going to be under $500,000.
Thank you.
And again, we'll just keep the design separate, so if you want to fund one or the other or both, when we come back to request construction funding. So we
Motion
want
to approve?
Yes.
So for clarification, motion, would your motion include that staff's looking at making sure pedestrian safety is not
Absolutely.
decreasing?
Yes.
Then with knowing that addition is in there, I second.
So can you state the motion, please?
Motion to approve request with the staff looking at pedestrian possible pedestrian crossing of the 3 lanes.
Clear on that one?
Yes, so we'll move forward with both, designing both projects, the northbound right turn lane on Woodstock Road and extending the lane along King Road into the student parking lot and looking at the pedestrian safety median, refuge island on King Road.
So I second that.
Thank you.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Judy, second by Councilmember Palermo. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Moving to item number 8, consideration of a resolution to apply the Atlanta Regional Commission, ARC, apply to the Atlanta Regional Commission, ARC, in the amount of $2 million for the State Route 9 Roswell Road, Atlanta Street pedestrian improvements across the Chattahoochee River. Mr. Ruff.
Thank you, Gary. So these are the next 2 items are good items, looking for opportunities for some funding. So for our project, you actually heard some details on this Chattahoochee pedestrian bridge project just at the council meeting a couple of days ago, but I still want to just quickly go over the background. So of course, the bike ped bridge crossing the Chattahoochee River, it's a very important bike ped connectivity and safety project. We've been working on it for several years. It's a project in the Transportation Master Plan and the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and it had a congressional earmark associated with it at $3 million for more than 10 years. And of course, with time, there is cost increases, and now we have a funding gap of $2.5 million. So we have this opportunity to apply for an ARC grant, and the deadline to apply is October 11th. So I'll just quickly talk about the project benefits. So the bottom left picture, this is looking from north to the south. This is the office building in Sandy Springs. You could see over the trees. So this is the quick rendering, rough rendering of the bridge. So this is on the east side of the existing vehicular bridge, and you could see on the aerial where it goes. And this has been designed, this and the Historic Gateway project, they've been designed to connect with each other to improve the pedestrian access to the national parks and along the Historic Gateway section, and of course to the square. So the suggestion is to apply for the ARC grant for $2 million. Those would be federal funds, and of course, like most other grants, it comes with a match. So it would be an 80-20. So the local match would be $500,000. And as you heard on Monday, we have an IGA with Sandy Springs that requires a 50-50 split of the local costs. So for Roswell and Sandy Springs, the cost would be $250,000 each to get this, if approved, to get this $2 million grant. And we anticipate the construction to be in the year 2022-23. So for one of the requirement of the grant is to have a commitment in form of a support resolution. So we have that in your packet. So that's what we need the approval on, and the suggestion would be to move that forward to the mayor and council meeting and give us permission to move forward with the application. But I had one more slide here. So just the top matrix shows you the current funding arrangements. So the city of Roswell cost as of today is $322,000 is funded, and we've been working on that. So $322,000, and with this current grant, if the city actually gets the grant, if it gets approved, so we'd have to put in another $250 as half of the local match. So city of Roswell's total cost for the project would be $572,000. Same for Sandy Springs, and then of course with the federal funding, with that match, total would be over $4.5 million. So what we need here is your permission to move forward with applying for the grant, and bring the support resolution to the council meeting in a couple weeks. And of course, the resolution states that we are kind of committing to the match, which is $250 for us and $250,000 for Sandy Springs. And we don't need that 250 till the time of construction, which is in a couple of years.
Do you have an idea where you're going to pull that 250 from, if approved?
We would, Rob, you want to answer that?
As Mohammed stated, design is currently funded, construction is not identified. We would be looking at a future budget request, FY21, FY22 for general fund money. I would need to speak with our finance director over there after this to see if it would be impact fee eligible or not, but that's a decision we can work through later.
Okay, thank you. Floor is open.
Motion to approve?
Motion approved by Councilmember Wilsey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tizer. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Item number 9, consideration of a resolution to apply for a grant to the Atlanta Regional Commission, ARC, in the amount of $8 million for the Historic Gateway Project. Mr. Ralph.
Thank you, Gary. So same grant opportunity, we wanna submit 2 applications. So the second one could be for our Historic Gateway project. So again, just to give you some background, for the Historic Gateway project, the city took the initiative to do the concept, and we are still working on the design. It's been many years that we've been working. And then somewhere along the way, we kind of requested GDOT that, hey, this is, the next phases of the project are too big for us, so would you take it on? So they agreed, and they started the right-of-way acquisition. So we want to request to submit this application for ARC funding for the construction year for fiscal year 2023. And that was actually a request that came to us from GDOT, because we are still the local sponsor, so we have to initiate this grant application. So it was a GDOT's request to us to do that. And so they have kind of committed for the remaining construction funds if we move forward with that. And I'll show you the numbers in a little bit so you'll understand construction-wise who gets to pay what. So the most recent construction estimate is at 32 million. And city's cost so far is about 4.5 million. And when we are done with the final design, city's total cost would be about 6 to 7 million. And then the current schedule is fiscal year 2026. That's the funding authorization by GDOT. But if we move forward with this grant and we get it, then the construction could move forward in the year 2023. So GDOT, like I said, is currently the lead for the right-of-way phase. The total estimated cost is 10 to 12 million, and they hope to finish that in 18 to 24 months. And it's already been almost a year, Rob, that they started that work?
Almost a year and a half.
Yeah, a year and a half, okay. So, and the project would be led to construction by GDOT. So like I said, Roswell is still responsible to complete the engineering plans, and WSP is our consultant. And we still, as planned and as anticipated, we still need the final plans as the right of way is being completed. That's when you start the final design. So we still need to fund that part, and you will see a change order for that in a future committee meeting. And that change order is eligible to use T-SPLOST funding. So that's a few months from now. So the financial impact, so if you approve for us to move forward with the grant, it's again an 80-20. So per GDOT suggestion, they're saying apply for 8 million. And in that case, Roswell's match would be 2 million. And we know at least of a couple other options where we could go after other grant options to pay for that match, or at least pay some towards that match. And we'll definitely explore more options, but we have time for that. But if we want the 2023 authorization of funds, the time to apply for this ARC grant, the 8 million is now. And when we get it for that construction year, we'll have to do that 2 million match, for which we may look into other grant options. So what we are requesting from you today is to allow staff to move forward with the grant application. And again, like the first one, it's the same grant. It needs support and a commitment resolution from the mayor and council, and it comes with a deadline. So we are going to bring that resolution to the next mayor and council, to a future mayor and council meeting between now and October 11th.
Thank you. Floor is open.
Thank you, Mohammed. Couple of questions. I'm in favor of applying for the grant. If we can get money from ARC, that's wonderful. But I do have a question about the total budget and where the funding is coming from. Earlier today, we had seen something where the Roswell portion, I guess from T-Splosh, was $3 million. And then you just mentioned that the design portion, Roswell's design portion was 6 to 7. I was just curious, kind of, total cost, what is the total cost and where is that money coming
Yeah,
from?
sorry, maybe we need a matrix to
Yes.
share with you. So we started working on the concept and design actually before 2012, because some significant things happened in 2012, so we were working on it before. So starting from then, whatever funds we use, local city funds we used, from that point to the end of the final design, city's total cost would be 6 to 7 million. And 3 of that, and then, in 2016, T-Splosh happened, so we knew we needed more money for the final design. So we requested 3 million as part of T-Splosh 1. So including that 3, the total by the end of the final design, city's local money, and then of course T-Splosh is also local money. So both of those, the total for the city would be 6 to 7 million when we are done with the final design.
So some of that has already been spent and committed,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And so the 3 million is additional from T-Splosh.
From the T-Splosh, yes.
Thanks, that helps.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Wilsey. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Judy. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Moving on to the mayor and council section, item number 10, consideration of GMA's request asking the city to ask local chamber of commerce and board of realtors to approve a resolution supporting local government's ability to establish residential building standards. Mayor Henry.
Well, I think this is pretty straightforward. Whether or not you're interested in a resolution to establish local control over building standards. I feel quite strongly that we do need to keep control. And now I do understand the initiative regarding affordable housing. However, I feel it's very important for us to look at what those recommendations are, but however, it should be our choice on the building standards. So perhaps Alice can add more to that.
There are a lot of cities, and I think this proposed ordinance, which is House Bill 302, came up in the legislation last year to restrict the city's ability to control certain aspects of construction. And basically looking at things like the layout of the homes, the facades. I mean, there's even communities that I've worked in that have restrictions on the type of mailbox that you can have. So this was in response, proposal was in response basically to those communities. In the city of Roswell, we don't have those types of strict regulations, so the initial proposal was not that much of an impact on the city, with the exception of the orientation of the garages But like with most things, it's a slippery slope. It may not impact us now, but it could in the very near future. The mayor and council did approve a resolution that was sent opposing this particular legislation. It was not moved forward for last year. However, there was a House resolution creating a study committee, and that committee purpose is to look at design standards and barriers and some other things related to affordable housing. From what I can gather from GMA, they're concerned that this is just a means to go back or to re-propose this particular legislation. We have talked to a contact that we have at the legislature, and they've indicated that nothing has happened yet, and that the purpose of the study committee is much more broader than this. But what GMA is asking for municipalities to do now is to reach out to your local chamber of commerce, your board of realtors, and see if they would approve a similar resolution and forward that to GMA.
So although I certainly wouldn't support, some of those extreme regulations that you mentioned, I fully support the need to have local control and to avoid the slippery slope. So I certainly support the mayor's initiative on this one.
Where's our delegation on this? Have you talked to any of them? Do we know if it's coming back in this next session or not?
We don't.
Let me also add to that we as the local municipalities, we have been taking a number of hits in the last couple of legislative sessions. So I think GMA is attempting to protect us in some ways, which I personally think that we need to protect ourselves. Pardon?
You want a motion?
Yes, please. That'd be nice.
Motion to move forward.
Second.
Motion forward by Councilmember Judy, second by Councilmember Palermo. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Moving on to item number 11, discussion of the Centennial Village property zoning in the Allston Commercial Corner.
Thank you. This is really just for informational and discussion among council. We've got two very key properties in the Centennial Node that are on the market right now. And as we just saw from the pedestrian bike master plan, these are very central hubs of activity with the high school and a lot of parks and the library nearby. My hope was that we would be able to do a master plan on these properties, but I understand since, we don't have an interest in the property specifically, and we, would need to have a willing party to partner with us. That's something that we can't do right now. So what I really want to do now is just for us to all understand the zoning and the conditions on the property. Understand there are some interesting conditions brought over from both Fulton County and that specific property when it was zoned. And then, what are our opportunities to partner with any investors and just to ensure a good outcome. So.
Okay, so the zoning on the property currently is CX. However, it was rezoned in Fulton County prior to us annexing it in. So on the screen, several slides, I have all the zoning conditions, which I can send to you via email if you would like to have them that way. It'll probably be simpler since there are numerous conditions. Obviously, it was zoned to retail, service, commercial. They did have a maximum of 3 parcels when they zoned it, limiting the height to no more than 3 buildings. Liquor store, fast food, or service station. Site plan condition on number 2. Condition number 3 was a landscape strip. Curb cuts, signalization, certificate of occupancy for the first commercial building, realigning Fouts Road. Then they had right-of-way dedications and items related to the different sections for the traffic conditions, all of which these had to be done before everything was in place back in the 90s when this was developed. Left turn lanes, internal roads, sidewalks, working with the Public Works Department that was down in Fulton County, and then they had tree ordinance requirements through Fulton County when they went through. Public Works and Stormwater, LDP and plating, and then cross sections related to stormwater conveyance system. And then the last one was related to submitting for LDP and everything else related to stormwater. That was the original, one of the original zonings. They did that was in 1995. Then they had a modification in 1997 that related to condition number 1, and it was for the retail, and then a maximum of 5 out parcels to be shown on the site. So they went from 3 out parcels to 5. And that was done all in Fulton County. We annexed the property in December 31st, 1999. In 2000, these are the remainder. So then they had no out parcel for a liquor store, the Sure Good out parcel. That's when that went in, and then no deliveries. So and then they had condition changed to number 2. But, and then a part of that motion was for silt runoff. That was all done in 1997. This was all done in Fulton County. In 2002, the city of Roswell had a zoning modification done there related to landscaping, soften the look, and then they had the landscape plan to go through the city arborist. That was a city modification that went through the Roswell City Council, and that was related to one of the out parcels. So, but then those are the conditions related to that. So the property was zoned, as we called it, Fulton County Annexed, until 2014, when we zoned it to CX, and it stayed with all the conditions that would have been placed on it, and all those moved forward. So those are all the conditions that are currently on the property at this point in time. You wanted to also know related to uses. So under the current UDC, what I put up on the screen over the next few slides are the uses that are listed as permitted, not the uses that are listed as limited. There are uses in our code that are listed as limited uses. So as long as they met that and they met the limitations, they could go there, like a daycare center. There's specific limitations that a daycare center would have to have.
So 2 families are still a permitted use in CX?
Yes. So single family, 2 family, everything that's on the board here, the screen. The next screen related to indoor gym, here are the commercial uses that we're coming up on: bed and breakfast, boutique hotel, hotel, personal service, animal, restaurant, retail, convenience store without gas pumps, research and development. Those are permitted by right. Just so you know, convenience store with gas pumps is also considered a limited use. And as we know, we do have, I think the Texaco station is out there. And that was done in Fulton County before it was annexed into the city. So that's what I have listed as the uses that are currently allowed by permitted under the UDC, under the CX zoning.
Anything other than what is currently approved or allowed by right under the UDC requires that property owner or that developer to come before mayor and council to seek approval. And of course, with that approval is the entire public input process. The thing that we looked at when we talked about master planning, it's difficult to master plan a single property that's already has some action that has been taken, already has some rights. And most of the things that I'm assuming, given the location of the property, that the community would want, it's already allowed. I know the one thing that the community is concerned about is some multifamily development, but that requires mayor and council approval. So that's as we all know, it's a high bar for them to jump. One of the things that we had talked about and this is even before the Target or before the Kohl's property even went on market, was to look at these specific target areas, what we call them, as a little differently when we do the comprehensive plan, which the comprehensive plan is one of those tasks that we have to start by the end of the year, because the state requires us to do it and have it done by a certain period of time. But to do the comprehensive plan a little bit differently, do it a little bit more strategically, not just do it as a check off the box that the state requires, but to not only do a plan that's going to meet the state requirements, but also to embed into the process master planning. And there are different types of master plan, and also, as we talked about at the council meeting, to look at the UDC. In doing the master planning, this corridor would be an area that we would look at. You know, without a doubt, we would definitely focus on the intersection of Holcomb Bridge and 400 and the intersection of Highway 9 and Holcomb Bridge and Crossville Road. But also look at the corridor to see what, if anything, needs to be done to basically change the direction or to steer it toward a direction that the community wants, but also maintain those property rights that those property owners have. When we did the 2030 plan, we did do a element of master plan, and we did a charrette a couple of days of the 400 and Holcomb Bridge, but we didn't go all the way down the corridor. So this time we will look at the entire corridor. There are several plans that have been done throughout the years for the city. One of the things that we recognize with some of those plans, and they have some good recommendations, but most of them were done prior to the downturn in the economy, prior to the change in the way retail is dealt with. So we might have to look at those retail areas a lot differently than we did, 10 years ago. And even when we did the 2040 plan, not 2040, that's the one we're doing, the 2030 and 2035 plans. So that's all of that's in the scope of work. That's why we asked for the dollar amount that we asked for during the budget, was so that we could do a plan a lot more strategically than we've done before.
So, Alice, Jackie, thank you for this. I think that, what I talked about the other evening in the, diagnostic review of the UDC as we go through the comp plan, 2040 comp plan next spring, it's got to be key. I think it's really, I've been asked the question a lot of times, why don't we just take that use out? And I think that when we go through the comp plan in the UDC, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand is the state, when they certify a comp plan, is just not going to let you take some uses out in certain areas, especially on, vital nodes, transportation nodes and stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not as easy as just saying we don't want that there, because the comp plan can't be certified unless by the state, unless the uses that they deem necessary are there, correct?
Well, I don't know if they get that specifically in individual uses. What they look at is the character area, and one of the things, and Bob can jump in if I'm practicing law again, Bob, is that it's always been my training and my understanding that you have to make reasonable accommodations for every use. Mm-hmm. And the minute that you say, nope, we can't have that use, you set your entire ordinance from being challenged in court. And it's not always a good thing if it's challenged and the individual or the group that's challenging it prevails. Because then you basically don't have code until you can address that issue. Am I practicing law right, Bob?
I think you are right.
Okay.
But they've said that numerous times.
But the one thing that ARC and the state will look at, because when you do comprehensive plan, you're not really looking at the here and now. You're looking at the future. You're looking at, hey, the region's growing. This is where we think it's going. Are you planning for that future? So you look at, okay, if we gotta have single-family homes, we know X number of people are gonna be in the city, where's the most appropriate place to have them? We know that there's an issue with, and they don't get into this detail, affordable housing. So usually if you have affordable housing, it's usually gonna be on smaller lots, smaller houses. Where do you wanna have smaller? Where do you wanna have infill? Where do you want to have economic development? Where do you want to concentrate your jobs? Those are the type of things that they look at. So yes, and unlike previous years, and Jackie can tell you this, they're scrutinizing more.
Yes.
And so, we have a hard deadline that we have to have it approved. And it seems like, that's 2 years away, but it goes by really quick. And even if they send it to us with a boatload of complaints, that deadline does not change. So we run the risk of losing our quality local government status, which is not a good thing, especially not a good thing for transportation, because all those grants they talked about, they're no longer eligible for. So that's why we try and look at all of this stuff in the beginning, so that we have a plan that the consensus from the community is that there's support, and it moves us forward for the future.
Okay, yeah, no, I just, it's complex, to say the least. And looking at a property like this, there's a lot that goes into that. And, as we go through the diagnostic and the comp plan, I think a lot of that, if we explain it as we go, can help people understand what we go through when we look at it from this side, so.
But just one of the key tasks that we do have in our draft scope of work is to take the time to educate and explain things better. This is why we do it, this is why we can't do it, this is what this means. And, I think, and it's not just the city of Roswell, I think a lot of communities don't realize, I know and we all, I do too, complain about the traffic, but the traffic is really because the region is growing. And so it's how do you deal with that? How do you plan with that when it's going to continue to happen in the next few years?
Thank you.
So I have a simpler question. If you wanted to buy this piece of property that we're talking about here, and you wanted to build a multi-story, multi-family unit on that property, it's not conditional. It would require a complete zoning change. Is that correct?
It would require conditional use.
Conditional use.
Conditional use is still in CX.
Yes, it would still say
Conditional use.
6.
Yes, if you want to do townhomes, it would require conditional use.
And I want to, if it's possible, to correct the record for anybody listening to
Did I
this
mess up the
later.
two-family?
Yeah, 2 families, we actually changed to conditional on July 8th.
Okay, so that was the one in July?
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. We're updating the code, so it was still in my thing.
Yeah.
Sorry about that one.
No problem, I just want to make sure
Okay.
if any developer, any resident is
Got
watching
it.
this later.
Anything other than single-family
Family.
homes, you have to
To do
come
a
in and
conditional
ask
use.
for.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for going through this. I know I get questions every day, and well, what's going to happen to this property? And I think, helping us to understand what the possibilities and what the process are.
I'll say this for the record, we really don't know. We've had there's lots of inquiries about this property, and we have been brutally honest with them.
Okay.
So there should be, unless they didn't talk to us, no surprises for anyone who comes forward and wants to do something to this property.
Right, okay.
Because
all right.
did you say, not today, but in a different meeting that you and I had as liaison, did you say that there were some of those inquiries calling in, there was the assumption that multifamily was permitted versus conditional?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
We had a few of those.
Very few.
And then they met us. And
Yep.
We gave them the,
they-
we told
they let
them,
us.
we told them the truth.
Then educated them on the code?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, and, look forward to the comprehensive plan process
I mean,
and continuing to keep our eye.
much like the strategic plan, the comp plan is probably the most important document that, and I'm making a picture, the community can get involved in,
Okay.
because it is the document that has the blessing of the state. It is the document that they look at when they're doing their bike, and it is the document that Bob and David use when they go to court. So it's a very important and painful sometimes process, but it's definitely worth it.
And yes, they are scrutinizing.
Oh, they're scrutinizing.
John West is my contact down there, and we've had long conversations. But over the last few years, we've actually had comments come back on ours, on the short-term work program and the CIE, and on the comp plan, when we had it sent down, because they have upped their game, I guess you can say, down at DCA, and they are really digging in and making sure that the communities are doing what they're supposed to be doing and indicating what they should be indicating in the documents. So,
And also, we're a plan first community, so
Yes.
for that reason alone, our comp plan needs to be the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 12, consideration to approve a resolution of respect for the city of Roswell, Councilman Palermo, and Councilman Tyson.
Excellent. So, for those of you that will remember, we had the open mic night. The last open mic night, we had a number of very active residents and community leaders bringing up just really the benefit and the opportunity for a resolution of respect, and that's something I'd like to discuss here. I am supportive of this, and certainly open to discussion and any concerns or edits that you might have in that support. So, Mr. Tizer, any?
So several leaders of our faith-based community have asked for our support with the language of this resolution. I've heard from a number of them, and also believe we should move forward.
I'm supportive of this as well.
Motion to approve?
Motion to move forward.
Motion to approve, Councilman Tyson. Second.
Yep, second.
Second by Councilman Palermo. All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. That is it. We are adjourned.